The crowd outside the family courthouse held their phones high as Kyle shoved a stack of papers into Ellie's hands. Her boutique had burned down that morning. The smoke smell still clung to her thrifted blazer. Kyle didn't lower his voice. He pointed at Ellie, then hooked an arm around Jenna, the same Jenna who folded dresses at Ellie's shop yesterday. "Sign it," Kyle said, loud enough for strangers to hear. "You're finished? I'm done paying for your mistakes." A woman in the crowd gasped. Someone else laughed. Ellie stared at the divorce line that waited for her signature. Her fingers shook. Jenna leaned into Kyle's shoulder and smirked like the ending was already written. That's when Ellie lifted her eyes, took one long breath, and said in a voice that barely cracked, "Are you sure you want the world to see this?" Before Kyle could answer, the courthouse doors swung open behind Ellie, and a silver-haired man in a navy suit stepped out with a folder stamped "Private Estate." He called Ellie by her full name. The crowd went quiet. If you're seeing this right now, drop a comment with your city. Where are you watching from? And don't scroll, because what was inside that folder would flip the whole story on its head. 2 weeks before the fire, Ellie was the kind of shop owner who knew every customer by their first name and shoe size. Her boutique, Second Son, sat on a corner with big windows and a bell that rang softly when people walked in. She sold simple dresses, clean jeans, and little pins that said kind things. Business was not booming, but it was honest. Ellie was honest. On slow days, she ate a banana in the back room and balanced the checkbook with a pencil that had bite marks. She didn't waste anything. When rent rose, she picked up night shifts at a bakery, then came back at dawn to steam clothes so they looked new. Kyle said he was proud of her. At least he said it when the lights were on and the neighbors could hear. In the kitchen, where no one could see, he rubbed his temples and sighed like Ellie's thrift store was a pebble inside his shoe. "This is not the life I signed up for," he'd say. "I thought you'd scale by now." The truth was, Kyle liked simple wins and fast applause. He worked in real estate, but mostly he worked on looking busy. He posted photos of watches and coffee cups with captions like, "Hustle never sleeps." He loved the taste of respect more than the work that earned it. Ellie noticed, but she also remembered the boy he used to be, the one who drove her to look at sunsets because sunsets were free. She held on to that memory like a handle on a moving bus. Jenna started at Second Son 6 months before the fire. She arrived early, stacked denim by color, and greeted women by complimenting their earrings. Customers liked her. She brought coffee for Ellie and asked smart questions about inventory. Once, when a supplier shorted them, Jenna stayed late and helped Ellie redo the shelves so empty spots looked like choices, not gaps. Ellie trusted her. She didn't know that Jenna also stayed late on nights she didn't clock, smiling down at her phone, answering texts from Kyle that started friendly and slid into something else. Ellie's Uncle Howard had been a quiet man who collected old books and fixed clocks in his garage. He never married, never bragged, never asked for anything. When Ellie was 8, he taught her how to oil the tiny gears inside a watch and said, "Listen to small things. They tell the truth." He passed away 3 years ago. The only letter that came to Ellie after the funeral said the estate would be handled over time. She didn't expect anything. She didn't live like someone who expected things. She worked. She stretched the last of the dish soap by adding a bit of water to the bottle, and she told herself it was fine. Trouble began like drips from the ceiling. A shipment of dresses arrived with bad stitching, and returns started to chew holes in the week. The landlord, Mr. Brooks, raised the rent because the street is getting hot. Kyle suggested a loan. Ellie said no. She didn't want to carry a bag she couldn't pay for. Instead, she launched a weekend sale with a smile and a chalkboard sign, even though she felt the chalk breaking inside her hand as she wrote. That Saturday, the sun baked the sidewalk. Jenna's sales were strong, Ellie's were slow. When Ellie took out the trash, she saw Kyle's car slide up to the curb. He waved at Jenna like they had a secret language. He didn't see Ellie watching from the alley. That night at home, Ellie touched the kitchen counter and asked Kyle if he'd stopped by the shop. He shrugged and said he was just buying a scarf for his mother. Ellie didn't know Kyle's mother wore scarves. She didn't say that. She said, "Okay," and felt the floor tilt under her feet. The fire came on a Monday morning that smelled like rain. Ellie opened the shop at 7 a.m. A sparking sound snapped behind the dressing rooms. She hurried to the back and saw a bright ribbon of flame licking up a power strip. She grabbed the fire extinguisher, pulled the pin, and squeezed until white dust covered everything. For a second, the flame coughed and shrank. Then a wire popped, the lights blinked, and heat bloomed across the ceiling like a fast storm. Ellie ran to the front, slammed the door open, and yelled for help. A passerby called the fire department. Sirens wailed. The bell over the door screamed as heat warped the metal. Ellie backed onto the curb, coughing, eyes stinging, cheeks wet from smoke and fear. She stared as months of work turned black in minutes. Jenna arrived, pressed a hand to her mouth and whispered, "Oh no," like she was surprised by the ending of a movie she'd already seen. When the smoke cleared and the fire crew left, the shop smelled like wires and wet ash. Ellie's shoulders sagged. She wanted to sit on the curb and sleep for a week. Kyle showed up in a crisp jacket, sunglasses on his head, jaw set like he was a judge arriving for a trial. He didn't ask if Ellie was okay. He didn't touch her shoulder. He asked about insurance. Ellie told him the policy would cover some damage, not all. Kyle shook his head like a coach looking at a losing team. "You had one job," he said softly, which hurt more than if he'd yelled. "Keep it afloat." Neighbors gathered. Phones rose. Someone asked if the store would reopen. Ellie opened her mouth, but a fireman was still talking to her about wiring reports, and her thoughts felt like beads rolling off a broken string. Kyle turned to the crowd and said, "We'll figure it out," but he said it like a man who planned to walk away. The divorce papers arrived by noon, hand-delivered at the courthouse because Kyle had meetings and couldn't drag this out. Jenna, for some reason, stood behind him like a shadow that learned to smile. The papers said words that tasted like metal: irreconcilable, abandonment, debt. Kyle had highlighted a section that said Ellie would take full responsibility for any outstanding business liabilities. He said he was protecting himself. He said Ellie was too emotional to handle numbers. Ellie felt heat rise in her neck. She watched Jenna's bright nails tap Kyle's sleeve like she was counting down. Before that morning, Ellie would have cried. She would have apologized even though she did nothing wrong. But something inside her slid into place, like a strong door finally finding its frame. Folder. She looked at the blue stamp on the papers and realized she was being pushed somewhere she didn't have to go. She didn't sign. She told Kyle she needed time to read. He called her stubborn and said stubborn women go nowhere fast. She lifted her chin and said, "Maybe nowhere is better than beside a man who points." The crowd murmured. Kyle's face reddened. The silver-haired man stepped out then, the one with the private estate folder. He was from a firm Ellie had only seen on letterheads, Peters and Lane. He smiled kindly, not like a rescuer, more like a neighbor who brought soup. "Ms. Ellis," he said, using the last name she kept from her father. "My name is Grant. We've been trying to reach you. I apologize for the delay. The estate had complicated holdings." He offered the folder. Kyle leaned in as if it were also his. Grant kept his hand steady. "May we speak where it's quiet?" he asked Ellie. The crowd leaned forward as if the answer would be sold on television. Ellie followed Grant to a bench under a small tree. The leaves shook like they knew a secret. Kyle hovered a few steps back with Jenna, pretending not to hover. Grant opened the folder. "Your Uncle Howard named you the sole beneficiary of his estate with a delayed distribution," he said. "The last asset, an energy fund he invested in 20 years ago, liquidated last week. The account cleared yesterday." He slid a page toward Ellie. The numbers lined up in a neat row, calm as stones. She blinked hard. She wasn't good with commas when they came in a long line. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't understand." Grant lowered his voice. "It's considerable." He gave the figure. It sat between them like a quiet animal with bright eyes. The corners of Ellie's mouth trembled. Her throat tightened, not because she was greedy, but because Uncle Howard had been listening to small things long before she knew she would need help. She pressed her palm to her chest. "Why now?" she asked. Grant explained the condition. The estate could not pay out until the final fund closed. The fund took years. The lawyers needed signatures from a partner who lived abroad. Everything finally aligned. If Ellie believed in clocks, she would have said the gears just clicked. Kyle tried to edge closer. "What is this?" he demanded. Grant turned, polite but firm. "A private matter," he said. Kyle laughed too loudly. "Nothing is private in a marriage," he said. Ellie looked at the papers in her hands that said marriage was now a list. She stood, steadied herself, and faced Kyle. "You told me today I'm a failure," she said, the words clean, not sharp. "You told me to sign and disappear." Kyle blinked, surprised she would repeat his lines. Jenna crossed her arms. "You can't keep him stuck, Ellie," she said, as if she were the one being set free. "He has to think about his future." Ellie met Jenna's eyes. "So do I," she said. Then she turned to Grant. "What should I do first?" Grant said they could meet at his office to review options. He said to take a breath, to not make any decisions with people who shouted. He said kindness was free and they had plenty at the office. Ellie smiled without showing teeth. It was the first time that day her face remembered how. The first high crashed into the first low quickly. When Ellie stepped off the courthouse steps, two reporters who happened to be nearby, one from a local channel, one from a gossip blog, asked if she had a comment about the fire and the divorce. Ellie kept walking. Kyle didn't. He told them he carried his wife for years and couldn't carry a storm made of ashes. He gave them lines he'd practiced in mirrors. Jenna touched his elbow like they were partners in a dance. Ellie felt the sting of being written by someone else's pen. She also felt something new, a quiet like a deep room where nobody could reach. At home, her apartment smelled like lavender from the dryer sheets she cut in half to save money. She sat at the table and laid out three things: the divorce papers, the estate notice, and a photo of her and Kyle from a day when they laughed without thinking about who was winning. She studied the photo. Kyle had his arm around her. Ellie held a muffin in a napkin. The muffin looked like a crown, which made her smile for a second. She put the photo face down. She went to the sink, washed the ash from under her nails, and let the water run until it was clear. Her phone buzzed with a number she didn't know. She ignored it. It buzzed again. A voicemail landed. She played it on speaker and set the phone on the table. "Miss Ellis, this is Derek from Citibank," the voice said. "We're sorry to hear about the fire. We also wanted to discuss a possible line of credit to help you rebuild. We can fast-track you." Ellie stared at the phone. She hadn't applied for any credit. Her mind connected dots. Kyle. He had friends at the bank. He would try to tie strings around her when she couldn't see the knots. She deleted the voicemail and wrote a note to herself in block letters. "Do not rush." She changed her passcodes. She moved the emergency cash from the sugar jar to the freezer. She packed a small bag, not because she planned to run, but because she wanted to remind herself she could leave any room that wasn't safe. She called her friend Tara, who worked at a small radio station and kept snacks in her purse for other people. Tara answered on the first ring. Ellie told her everything, up to the bench under the tree and the number that made her hands cold and warm at the same time. Tara whistled. "Girl," she said, "this is the plot twist people pray for. But we play it smart. We move quiet. We document. We let people show you who they are." Ellie cried then, not because of money but because someone was on her side. Tara asked if Ellie wanted company. Ellie said yes. Before Tara arrived, the doorbell rang. Ellie wiped her face and opened the door. Kyle stood there, no Jenna in sight. He wore the same jacket, but his voice had changed keys. "We should talk," he said, soft like the gentle version of himself he used when they were new. He tried to step inside. Ellie blocked the doorway with her body. "About what?" she asked. Kyle looked past her at the couch, the framed photo of the lake, the plant she kept alive with a teaspoon of water at a time. "About us," he said. "About rebuilding. I was angry at the courthouse. I said things I didn't mean." Ellie tilted her head. She had been given many words today. She would choose carefully now. "You meant them when you said them," she replied. "That's enough truth for me." Kyle reached for her hand. She didn't give it. He sighed. He tried a new angle. "Listen," he said. "I talked to a guy at the bank. We can get funds to reopen the store under my name. I'll manage the money. You'll do the creative stuff. That's what you're good at." Ellie thought of the private estate folder. He didn't know. She watched his face, a map of shallow rivers. "Why under your name?" she asked. "I'm better with numbers," he said quickly. "It's safer." Ellie almost laughed. She didn't. She kept her mouth still. In that stillness, something else clicked. Uncle Howard's letter. She had saved it in a kitchen drawer. She pulled it out and read the line that had confused her years ago. "Funds will be released when all accounts are settled and the beneficiary is acting of her own clear will." Acting of her own clear will. Ellie looked at Kyle, at his hand on the doorframe, at the way his eyes scanned her home like it was a page he wanted to rewrite. She stepped back and closed the door halfway so only part of his face remained. "I'm going to the lawyer's office," she said. "Alone. I'll call you after I read every line." Kyle's jaw set. He leaned forward. "Don't be stupid, Ellie," he hissed, the soft key gone. "You won't get far without me." The hall light flickered. Downstairs, someone laughed at a TV joke Ellie couldn't hear. She steadied her voice. "I already got far," she said. She started to close the door. Kyle slipped his hand into the gap. "You owe me," he said. "For everything I put into your little dream." His fingers tightened on the wood. Ellie looked at the hand that had once cupped the back of her head when she was sick and now blocked her path. She pictured the shop windows and the white dust floating like snow, the crowd outside the courthouse, the folder on the bench. She said with no shake, "Move your hand." Kyle moved it. "Think," he warned, backing up. "Think hard." Ellie nodded. "I will," she said and closed the door. When Tara arrived, she brought soup in a jar and a notebook. They sat at the table while the sky turned the color of old paper. Ellie told her about the call from the bank. They made a list of what to do next. Meet Grant, freeze joint accounts until legal counsel advised, change the shop's mailing address to a P.O. box, call the landlord about the wiring report, file an incident number, move copies of everything to a cloud folder Kyle couldn't touch. Tara wrote each item in big letters and drew a box to check beside it. Ellie felt her breath even out as the boxes multiplied. Work made sense. Work was the one love that didn't lie. At 7 p.m., Ellie and Tara walked to the corner to get some air. The street smelled like rain again. A car crept past and parked across from Ellie's building. The engine stayed on. The windows were tinted. Tara noticed. "That look normal to you?" she asked. Ellie squinted. The passenger window eased down an inch. A camera lens glinted. Tara took Ellie's elbow. "Inside," she whispered. Back in the apartment, Ellie's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number popped up. "Heard you're cashing out. Let's talk partnership." No name. A second text landed from Kyle. "We can fix this if you stop the drama and do as I say." Ellie felt the two lines tug in opposite directions. She muted the phone, placed it face down, and looked at Tara. "One step at a time," Tara said, tapping the notebook. Ellie nodded and poured soup into bowls. The doorbell rang again. Ellie and Tara froze. "If it's him, I'll tell him to leave," Tara said, already standing. Ellie stepped with her. She looked through the peephole. It wasn't Kyle. It was Grant, the lawyer, flanked by a woman in a gray blazer with a badge clipped to her belt. Grant spoke through the door before Ellie even asked, his voice calm. "Miss Ellis, may we come in? We need to show you something urgent we uncovered about the fire's cause." Ellie unlatched the chain and opened the door. Grant and the woman stepped in. The woman introduced herself as Detective Hall. She set a small folder on the table next to Tara's soup bowl. The folder held two printed photos, the back of the boutique, a power strip, and a curl of blackened wire, and a second photo of a man's hand wearing a watch Ellie knew too well, inserting a plug into the overloaded strip the night before the fire. The timestamp glowed in the corner. Ellie gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles went white. She lifted her eyes to Detective Hall. "Is this what it looks like?" she asked. The detective nodded, careful, choosing each word like it might break. "We're still gathering evidence," she said, "but we think someone staged an overload. We traced a security camera from the shop next door after the owner finally gave us access. We need to ask you some hard questions about who had keys and who knew your schedule." Ellie's throat felt tight, but her voice came out steady. "Ask," she said. The detective opened a notebook. "Did your husband Kyle have a key to the store?" she asked. Ellie didn't answer right away. A third photo slid from the folder, a reflection in the neighbor's glass, a lean figure in a cap, face turned away. Detective Hall tapped the corner of the photo. "We also need to know who this is." Ellie looked at the grainy face, at the watch, at the way the fingers held the plug like a person holds a pen when they're about to sign away a life. Her chest burned like smoke was still inside it. She closed her eyes for one count, then let them open. "He did," she said. "He had a key." And then the buzzer sounded again, long and hard, cutting through the room like a siren. Ellie and Tara turned their heads at the same time. Grant stood and moved toward the door. Detective Hall set her hand on the table. "Ready?" Ellie's phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "I know what you're worth. Open up." The buzzer screamed through the apartment like a trapped bird. Detective Hall's hand hovered near her badge, eyes sharp. "Don't open yet," she said firmly. Ellie's heart pounded so loudly she thought it might answer the buzzer for her. Tara stood frozen beside the table, one hand gripping her soup spoon like a weapon. The sound buzzed again, longer this time. Outside, muffled voices rose, men's voices, one sharp, one calm. Detective Hall nodded to Grant. He moved to the door quietly and peered through the peephole. His shoulders stiffened. "It's him," he whispered. "Your husband." Ellie's throat tightened. "Kyle." She could almost feel his presence through the door, his cologne mixed with that same cold arrogance that always filled every room before his words did. He knocked hard now. "Ellie, I know you're in there. Don't make this worse." His voice was a mix of command and desperation. The detective motioned for silence. Grant raised a finger to his lips. The knocking continued. "You can't hide behind lawyers and cops forever," Kyle barked. Then lower, "We both know I built everything with you." His tone cracked at the end of the sentence like a man who didn't know which mask to wear, anger or fear. Detective Hall gave Grant a nod, then opened the door just enough to reveal her badge. Sir, step back. This is an ongoing investigation. Kyle blinked, caught off guard. Investigation? For what? That shop fire? He laughed sharply. It was an accident. Everybody knows that. Step back, the detective repeated, her voice firm. Tara's eyes darted between them. Ellie stood still, her pulse drumming in her ears. Kyle glanced past the detective's shoulder, locking eyes with Ellie for a second. His expression shifted, from defiant to cornered. Ellie, he said softly, you're letting them twist things? You know I wouldn't hurt you. You know me. Ellie took one breath, deep and slow. That's the problem, she said quietly. I do know you. The detective shut the door before Kyle could respond. The hallway filled with the echo of his retreating footsteps and one angry slam of the stairwell door. Silence wrapped the room like smoke after an explosion. Detective Hall turned back to Ellie. We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow morning for a full statement, she said. Until then, do not contact him. If he tries to reach you again, call us immediately. Ellie nodded. Her lips trembled, but her voice held. I won't call him, she said. Grant gathered the photos into the folder. We'll send a copy of everything to your email, he said. And Ellie, keep this quiet for now. If what we suspect is true, the motive isn't just jealousy or anger. It's money. Money. That word had always made Ellie feel small, but tonight it made her feel watched. Tara squeezed her shoulder gently. You're not alone, she whispered. Ellie managed a small nod. When the detective and Grant finally left, the apartment seemed too quiet, the ticking wall clock too loud. She went to the window and peeked through the blinds. The street outside glistened under a light rain. The black car that had parked earlier was gone. Still, Ellie's skin prickled. She whispered, he's not finished. Morning crawled in gray and heavy. Ellie didn't sleep. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize the woman staring back, eyes swollen but sharper. She dressed simply, dark jeans, a beige sweater, hair pulled back in a clean bun. Tara brewed coffee and scribbled notes in the same notebook from last night. We'll go with you, she said. You shouldn't walk in there alone. The police station sat at the edge of downtown, next to a bakery that smelled too sweet for a place that held so much truth. Inside, the waiting area buzzed with low voices, papers shuffling, and the hum of computers. Detective Hall met them at the door and led them to a small room with pale walls and a flickering light. She began recording. State your name, please. Eleanor Ellis, Ellie said softly. Do you know the man in this photo? Hall slid a picture across the table, the grainy shot of the figure near the power strip. Ellie looked at the familiar outline, the angle of the wrist, the heavy watch. Yes, she said, her voice steady now. That's my husband, Kyle. The detective nodded. Did he have any reason to want the boutique destroyed? Ellie hesitated. Yes. It wasn't about the store, it was about control. He said I was holding him back. That I made him look small because I worked with my hands instead of showing off. Hall leaned forward. Did you ever feel threatened before the fire? Ellie's breath caught. Images flashed in her mind, Kyle slamming doors, mocking her voice, ignoring her questions, then the slow silence that came after. Not physically, she said, but he had a way of making everything my fault. He liked watching me apologize. Hall wrote notes quietly. And Jenna? Ellie's eyes hardened. She worked for me. Then she worked for him. Do you believe she knew about the fire? Ellie swallowed. I don't think she lit the match, she said. But she knew which corner of my world to burn first. The detective looked up. Explain. Ellie's voice grew stronger. Jenna filed the insurance renewal forms. She knew the coverage dropped the week of the fire. She told me she mailed the payment. She didn't. Tara's hand flew to her mouth. Ellie, that's deliberate. Hall nodded slowly. We'll confirm the mailing logs. That's a serious accusation, but if it's true, she exhaled, it fits the pattern. Grant entered the room quietly halfway through, carrying a brown envelope. Sorry to interrupt, he said, placing it on the table. These are copies of the account transfers tied to the estate release. Miss Ellis, your funds are now officially cleared. Ellie blinked. Already? Yes. We expedited it after last night's discovery. Grant opened a document and pointed to the balance. The number sat there calmly, unapologetic. This is your account. No one else has access. The detective looked at the paper, then at Ellie. That's significant. Ellie nodded faintly. She didn't smile. She felt the weight of it, the irony that the same woman who begged her landlord for mercy now had more money than anyone in that room. But money didn't erase betrayal. It only changed the light around it. As they finished the statement, Detective Hall's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her brow furrowed. "Ellie, stay in here for a moment," she said, stepping out. Tara and Grant exchanged worried looks. A few minutes later, Hall returned. "We just received a report," she said quietly. "Your husband withdrew $20,000 from a joint account at 8:15 a.m. and left town in his SUV. The toll cameras show him heading toward the interstate." Ellie's pulse quickened. "Where is he going?" "We don't know yet," Hall said. "But we're issuing a temporary restraining order and alerting highway patrol." Tara exhaled shakily. "So he's running? Or planning something worse?" Hall murmured. Ellie pressed her hands together to keep them from shaking. "He won't disappear," she said softly. "He doesn't know how. He'll come back when he thinks I'm scared." Later that afternoon, Ellie and Tara returned home. The sky was pale blue now, the kind that pretends nothing bad ever happened. Ellie brewed tea, trying to steady herself. Her phone buzzed again, unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello." A man's voice replied, low and smooth. "Ms. Ellis? This is Michael Trent from Horizon Investments. Your husband contacted us about transferring assets tied to your boutique's insurance payout." Ellie's stomach dropped. "He can't do that. It's in my name." "Yes," Michael said carefully, "but he claimed you were incapacitated. He sent scanned documents with your signature." Ellie's breath caught. "That signature isn't real. It's forged." "I thought so," Michael said. "That's why I called to confirm before approving anything. I've put the transaction on hold, but you need to act fast." "Thank you," Ellie said, gripping the counter. Her mind raced. Kyle was desperate. He knew about the insurance, maybe he guessed about the inheritance. He was reaching for anything before the walls closed. She hung up and looked at Tara. "He's trying to move money. Fake signatures." Tara shook her head. "He's spiraling, Ellie. That means he's losing." Ellie nodded, but her eyes clouded. "Or he's planning something big to win." That evening, Ellie met Grant at his downtown office to finalize security over her estate. The office sat on the 15th floor, overlooking the city. The sunset turned the windows gold. Grant explained the new accounts, legal protections, and a private foundation option if she wanted to use part of the funds for charity. Ellie listened carefully, her pen moving slowly across the papers. "Uncle Howard would want this money to help people," she said quietly. "Not just save me." Grant smiled. "That's what makes you different from most of my clients." As they talked, the receptionist buzzed in. "Mr. Grant, there's a delivery for Ms. Ellis. No sender name." Grant frowned. "Strange. We're after hours." The receptionist brought in a medium box sealed with black tape. Ellie's name was printed neatly across the top. Grant started to reach for it, but Ellie stopped him. "Wait," she said. "Don't open it yet." Her gut told her it wasn't a gift. Grant nodded and called security. Within minutes, 2 guards arrived and inspected the box. One of them scanned it and shook his head. "No electronics inside, no explosives. Feels like papers." They cut the tape carefully. Inside lay a stack of burnt photographs, charred at the edges, smoke-stained, but still clear enough to recognize faces. Ellie's heart lurched. They were pictures of her and Kyle from their wedding day, their anniversary, and the boutique grand opening. Across each photo, written in thick black marker, were words, "You owe me everything." Grant exhaled slowly. "He's trying to intimidate you." Ellie's hands clenched. "Then he still doesn't understand who I am now." Night deepened. The office lights dimmed. Grant offered to walk Ellie to her car, but she shook her head. "I'll be fine," she said. "I need to stand on my own 2 feet again." As she stepped into the parking lot, the city lights reflected off wet pavement. She unlocked her car and froze. A single rose sat on the hood, tied with a ribbon. Her chest tightened. Attached to it was a note in Kyle's handwriting. "You can't erase me." She looked around, nothing but shadows. But she could feel eyes somewhere in the dark. She grabbed the note, tore it in half, and got in the car. Her hands shook as she started the engine. Halfway home, her phone buzzed again, this time a video message. Against her better judgment, she opened it. It was a clip from the day of the fire, recorded from the boutique's side window. The camera panned across shelves, clothes, and then caught Kyle and Jenna arguing in the back room. His hand slammed the table. Her face twisted in fear. The clip ended with Kyle pulling a lighter from his pocket. Ellie's breath hitched. Her mind reeled. Someone had sent proof. But who? And why now? When she reached her apartment, she forwarded the video to Detective Hall with the message, "You need to see this." Within minutes, Hall called. Ellie, lock your doors and stay inside. We're tracing the source. Don't open to anyone. Ellie nodded, whispering, I won't. She hung up and drew the curtains. Tara texted, You okay? Want me to come over? Ellie typed back, No. Stay safe. I think he's watching me. Hours later, rain started again. The building creaked under the wind. Ellie sat on the couch, clutching her old boutique sign that she'd saved from the rubble. Its letters, Second Son, were half-burned but still readable. She whispered, I'm still here, like a prayer to herself. A soft knock echoed from the door. 3 taps. Then silence. Her heart jumped. She tiptoed to the peephole. No one. Then, just as she stepped back, a folded paper slid under the door. She crouched slowly, picked it up. Inside were 2 words in neat handwriting, Check window. Her pulse pounded. She crept to the living room window and peeked through a tiny gap in the curtain. Across the street, a figure in a dark coat stood under the streetlight, motionless, head tilted slightly up toward her window. Even from that distance she knew. Ka. He raised his phone and pressed play. On the screen, a faint glow flickered, a video call request. Her phone buzzed seconds later. Incoming video call, Kyle. Ellie's hands shook. She didn't answer. The call ended, then restarted again and again. On the 5th ring, a message appeared instead. If you don't talk to me, I'll make the world believe you burned it yourself. Ellie's throat tightened. He had photos, connections, the charm to twist every truth. But this time she had something too, proof, money, and the will to fight back. She opened the video app and began recording herself. My name is Eleanor Ellis, she said, voice low but steady. If anything happens to me tonight, know that I did not harm anyone or anything. The man responsible for the fire and for this fear is my husband, Kyle Ellis. I have proof. She saved the file and uploaded it privately to cloud storage. Her phone buzzed again, another message, this one chilling. You think you're safe behind that door? Look down. Ellie's eyes darted to the floor. A shadow moved under the crack of the door. Then the sound, soft metal scraping. The lock. Someone was trying to pick it. Her heart raced. She grabbed her phone and whispered into it, He's here. The line connected to Detective Hall's voicemail, then silence. The scraping stopped. For a moment, the only sound was rain. Ellie backed away slowly, holding her breath. Then the door burst open. A flashlight beam cut through the dark, sweeping across the room. Ellie gasped and raised her hands, but the voice that spoke wasn't Kyle's. Police, don't move. 2 officers stepped in, guns drawn. Behind them, Detective Hall appeared, soaked from rain. Ellie, you're safe, she said quickly. We traced the signal. The video you received, it came from an abandoned storage unit registered to your husband's name. We raided it an hour ago. You need to see what we found. Ellie blinked, trembling. What did you find? Hall held up a clear evidence bag containing several USB drives and a burnt notebook. Footage, financial records, plans. You didn't just set one fire, Ellie. He was planning to claim your insurance and transfer the inheritance when you died. The room tilted. What? Ellie whispered. Hall nodded grimly. He wasn't just running. He was setting a trap. Ellie sank onto the couch, tears streaming silently. Tara rushed in moments later, breathless and wide-eyed. She hugged Ellie tightly. You're safe now, she whispered. But Hall's next words hung heavy. Not yet. He's still out there. Ellie looked up slowly, her voice barely a whisper. Then I'll find him before he finds me. The sirens faded outside, but inside Ellie's apartment, the silence hit harder than any sound. She sat on the couch, staring at the evidence bag in Detective Hall's hand. Inside were USB drives labeled in Kyle's handwriting, sharp, angry strokes, the same letters that once signed birthday cards with love. Tara knelt beside her. Ellie, she whispered, you're safe now? They found everything. But Ellie's voice came out hollow. Safe? He planned to kill me, Tara. The man I married, the one I built dreams with. Detective Hall crouched, her tone gentle but firm. Ellie, listen to me. He's desperate. That makes him reckless. But it also makes him visible. We'll find him. Ellie looked up, her face pale but steady. Then I'm not hiding anymore. I'll help you find him. Hall exchanged a look with Grant, who stood by the door. That's not how this works, Hall said. Ellie rose slowly. That's exactly how it's going to work. Her voice trembled, but the resolve behind it didn't. She turned to Grant. You said the drives have financial records? He nodded. Yes. Transfers, offshore accounts, passwords, things I shouldn't even be seeing without clearance. Ellie's eyes sharpened. Then maybe we'll find where he's going next. The next morning dawned heavy with rain clouds, the kind that made the world look gray and honest. Ellie arrived at the precinct before sunrise, wearing a navy trench coat and boots. The detectives were already gathered around a table filled with maps, laptops, and printed stills from security cameras. Hall waved her over. "You're early." Ellie shrugged. "Couldn't sleep." Hall gestured to a screen. "We traced Kyle's SUV heading west. He refueled in Ogun Falls, small town 2 hours from here. After that, we lost him." Ellie studied the map. "What's in Ogun Falls?" "An old warehouse district," Hall said. "Mostly abandoned properties and storage units." Grant entered carrying a new folder. "You'll want to see this," he said, sliding it onto the table. One of the USB drives contained video clips labeled Project Renewal. Hall frowned. "Sounds like a business pitch." "Not exactly," Grant replied. He clicked a file open on the screen. A video played, grainy handheld footage of Kyle speaking directly into a camera. "This will fix everything," Kyle said in the recording, his eyes wild. "Once the insurance clears and the estate transfers, I'll rebuild from scratch. She'll be gone and no one will ever know." The room went still. Ellie's heart thudded painfully. Hall turned off the monitor. "That's enough," she said. "We've got motive, confession, and premeditation." But Ellie wasn't watching the screen anymore. She was watching the reflection of herself in it, a woman unrecognizable from the one who used to fold clothes in a tiny boutique. "He planned every second," she murmured. "Even the moment I would stop breathing." Hours passed in paperwork and interviews. By afternoon, the rain eased. Hall received a call and stepped outside. When she returned, her expression had shifted, part alarm, part realization. "What is it?" Ellie asked. Hall dropped her phone on the table. "Kyle's car was found abandoned at the docks. And someone just tried to access your inheritance account from a terminal registered to an import company near there." Grant's brow furrowed. "That means he's close." Ellie's chest tightened. "Then let's finish this." Hall hesitated. "Ellie, this isn't your fight anymore." Ellie met her gaze. "It became my fight the day he threw divorce papers at me." By evening, they reached the docks, rows of warehouses standing like tired giants under flickering lights. Rainwater pooled in the cracks of the pavement. Police cars lined the street quietly. Hall motioned for silence as they advanced toward one warehouse marked with peeling blue paint. The sign read Hendricks Storage Unit 04. Inside, the air was damp, filled with the scent of salt and old oil. Boxes were stacked high, shadows layered over shadows. Flashlights cut thin paths through the darkness. Then, movement. A sound faint like a boot scraping metal. "Freeze!" Hall's voice echoed. A figure darted from behind a crate, knocking over a barrel. Officers shouted. Ellie ducked instinctively, her pulse exploding. Then she heard it, a voice she could never mistake. "Always showing up where you don't belong," Kyle sneered from the shadows. His tone was calm, mocking. "You should have stayed the quiet little shop girl." Ellie straightened slowly. "And you should have stayed the man you pretended to be." He laughed softly, stepping into the weak light. His face was unshaven, eyes bloodshot, shirt half-buttoned. "Look at you," he said. "All dressed up like a hero. You wouldn't even have that coat without me." Hall raised her gun. "Kyle Ellis, you're under arrest for arson, fraud, and attempted." "Attempted nothing," Kyle interrupted, raising his hands. "You can't prove anything yet." Hall smirked. "You burned your confession onto a flash drive." Kyle's grin faltered just slightly. "You think I didn't plan for that? You think I didn't make copies?" He reached into his jacket. Officers tensed, guns drawn. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out a small phone and held it up. "One click," he said, "and every copy of that video goes public, with your precious wife, Ellie, edited as the villain." Ellie froze. "What?" Kyle's smile widened. "You really think I wouldn't twist the ending? I've been building this narrative for months. You're the crazy wife who burned her shop for attention. You're unstable, jealous, broke. That's the story people will see first." Hall inched closer. "Put the phone down." Kyle shrugged. "Make me." Ellie's voice sliced through the tension. "You won't do it." Kyle looked at her, amused. "You still think you know me?" She stepped forward slowly, ignoring Hall's warning glance. "No," Ellie said. "I know myself. You need control like air. If you release that video, you lose it. Everyone will see the monster you've become." Kyle's jaw twitched. For the first time, he hesitated. Ellie kept her eyes on him. You used to mock me for believing in small miracles. But here's one, you don't scare me anymore. That moment cracked something in him. He lunged, not toward her but toward the exit. Officers shouted. A shot rang out, not a hit, just a warning. Kyle sprinted into the rain, vanishing between containers. Hall cursed under her breath. He's gone. Ellie stood trembling, the adrenaline burning through her veins. He's not gone, she said softly. He's just waiting for Act 2. Days passed. The story hit the news. Wealthy realtor accused of attempted arson and fraud. Social media exploded with theories. Ellie stayed out of sight, guarded at a safe house. Tara visited daily, bringing laughter and soup. But peace never stayed long. Every night, Ellie checked her phone, waiting for the next shadow from Kyle. One evening, as she reviewed files with Grant, he noticed something strange in the bank logs. Look at this, he said. A transaction from your uncle's trust, 2 years ago, to a private consultant under Kyle's company name. Ellie frowned. What kind of consultant? Grant zoomed in. Security systems. Fireproofing contracts. Her blood ran cold. He didn't just plan my fire. He used my uncle's money to test it. Tara gasped. You mean, the fortune was never hidden? He knew part of it existed. Ellie nodded slowly. He knew enough to risk everything for it. Hall entered then, holding a file. We've got something, she said. Customs just flagged a ticket under a fake name matching Kyle's alias, Kevin Morris. Destination, South Africa. Ellie's pulse quickened. He's leaving? Hall nodded. Midnight flight. We're coordinating with airport security, but it's tight. Ellie's instinct screamed. He won't board. He'll try something first. Hall sighed. What makes you say that? Ellie looked out the window. Because running isn't his endgame. He needs to win before he disappears. At 11:10 p.m., Ellie sat in the back of an unmarked car outside the airport with Hall beside her. Rain streaked down the windows again. If we see him, don't engage, Hall said. We'll handle it. Ellie nodded, eyes locked on the terminal doors. People rushed by with luggage, unaware of the storm hiding among them. Then she saw him. Kyle, cap pulled low, carrying a duffel bag, moving fast. But he wasn't heading toward departures. He was heading toward parking. Hall, Ellie whispered. He's not leaving. Hall barked orders into her radio. Officers moved. Ellie's heartbeat thundered. Kyle reached a black sedan and opened the trunk. For 1 second, his eyes met hers across the lot, cold recognition. Then he threw something small onto the ground and slammed the door shut. A bright flash erupted. Smoke burst upward. Officers shouted and dove for cover. Ellie ducked, ears ringing. The air filled with smoke and shouting. Hall grabbed her arm, pulling her back behind a pillar. Stay down. Through the haze, Ellie glimpsed the sedan speeding away, tires screeching. He planted a decoy. Hall yelled. He's still in the building. Ellie turned toward the chaos inside the terminal. Her mind raced. If not escape, then what? Then it hit her. The inheritance. The documents. The press. He wanted one last stage. 15 minutes later, the broadcast began. Every news channel flashed the same live feed. Kyle Ellis standing in front of a camera at a rented studio, claiming innocence. This is not what you think, he said smoothly. My wife is manipulating everything. She's using my late uncle's money to frame me. Ellie stared at the screen, her chest heaving. He found a way to flip the story again. Grant clenched his jaw. We can counter this, but we need evidence. Something live, undeniable. Hall looked at Ellie. You said you had a recording, the one you made that night. Where is it? Ellie pulled out her phone, opening the cloud app. Here. Time-stamped, voice clear. Hall nodded. We're streaming it now. Within minutes, 2 screens played side by side, Kyle's broadcast and Ellie's message to the world. My name is Eleanor Ellis. If anything happens to me tonight, know that I did not harm anyone or anything. The man responsible is my husband, Kyle Ellis. I have proof. The internet split. Comments flooded in. Viewers compared dates, tones, eyes. The truth began to shift in real time. But Kyle wasn't done. He leaned closer to his camera, fury bleeding through his smile. You think you've won, Ellie? He spat. You think money makes you clean? Look around. You're still the woman nobody believed in. Ellie's face hardened. She whispered to herself, maybe not then, but they will now. Detective Hall's phone buzzed. A text appeared on the screen from an unknown number. She won't make it to part 4. Hall's eyes widened. He's threatening again. She turned to Ellie. We're moving you tonight. Pack fast. Ellie hesitated. Where to? Safe location undisclosed. He won't find you. But Ellie's intuition twisted. He already knows where I go before I do. He's watching from somewhere close. Grant stepped forward. Then we bring the fight to him. 2 hours later, under a storm-heavy sky, they drove toward the outskirts of the city. Ellie sat in the back seat, clutching the burned boutique sign again. It was more than wood, it was memory, pain, rebirth. Tara's voice echoed in her mind. The ones you discard become the ones you can't escape. As they neared the highway bend, headlights flared suddenly from behind, a truck speeding toward them. Hall swerved. Tires screeched. The truck rammed into their rear bumper once, twice. Hold on. Hall shouted. The car spun, slammed into the guardrail. Metal screamed. The world flipped sideways. When Ellie opened her eyes, smoke filled the airbag. Hall groaned beside her, dazed but alive. Grant's forehead bled. Ellie unbuckled herself, coughing. The truck door creaked open outside. Heavy boots hit the asphalt. A shadow approached through the rain. Cow. His face wild, drenched, eyes dark with rage. He kicked the car door open. You think you can ruin me and walk away? He snarled. You took everything. Ellie stumbled out, gripping the sign piece like a weapon. You gave me nothing, she shouted back. And I still became everything you feared. He lunged, grabbing her arm. They struggled beside the railing, rain pouring down, headlights flashing like lightning. Hall tried to reach her gun, but pain slowed her. Grant shouted, Ellie, duck. She twisted, the wooden sign cracking against Kyle's shoulder. He roared, shoving her toward the edge. The highway below glowed with the blur of cars. Kyle's voice shook. If I can't have peace, neither can you. Ellie looked into his eyes, once familiar, now monstrous. Then you'll have silence, she said, and shoved back with everything left in her. They both slipped. His grip loosened. For a split second, his hand caught the railing, then rain-slick metal betrayed him. Kyle fell backward into darkness, his scream swallowed by the storm. Ellie collapsed, trembling, rain mixing with tears. Hall crawled toward her, pulling her away from the edge. It's over, Hall whispered. But Ellie's eyes stayed on the darkness below. No, she murmured. Not until I see the body. The wind howled through the night. Down below, sirens began to wail again, but between the echoes, a faint metallic sound rang out. A car door creaking open. Ellie froze. He's still alive. Rain poured over the bridge like the sky wanted to erase what had just happened. Sirens screamed somewhere below, their echoes twisting through the dark. Ellie sat on the asphalt, her breath trembling, staring into the emptiness where Kyle had fallen. The wind howled through the broken guardrail, cold against her face. Detective Hall knelt beside her, voice steady but low. He's gone, Ellie. Ellie shook her head slowly. No, not until I see him. Her eyes didn't blink. They searched the darkness like she could pull the truth back with sheer will. Down below, flashlights danced. A paramedic's shout rose through the rain. Hall turned toward the sound, eyes narrowing. They found something. Minutes later, officers climbed the slope carrying a stretcher covered in silver foil. A faint groan broke through the storm. Ellie froze. He was alive. Kyle Ellis, the man who once swore to love her forever and nearly destroyed her, still had breath left. Hall gave a quick order to the medics. Get him under custody. He doesn't leave the hospital without a guard. Ellie watched as they loaded him into the ambulance, a strange calm settling over her chest. She thought she'd feel relief or rage or something loud, but all she felt was silence. She whispered to herself, he gets to live. Then he gets to face me. Days turned into weeks. The world moved fast. News stations replayed clips of the chase, the fall, the discovery of his crimes. Headlines screamed, businessman Kyle Ellis charged with attempted murder and fraud. Comment sections exploded with disbelief and pity, but the story that spread the most was not his, it was hers. People shared the video Ellie had recorded, the one where her voice shook but didn't break. It became a symbol for every woman who had been silenced. Hashtags trended. Talk shows mentioned her courage. Still, fame felt strange. Ellie didn't want cameras, she wanted closure. She spent her days quietly at a small guest house by the coast, helping Tara and Grant organize the charity she'd started in Uncle Howard's name, Second Son Foundation, a fund for women rebuilding their lives after betrayal or loss. The irony wasn't lost on her. What once burned her down was now the name of hope. One evening, Tara came running in with the phone pressed to her ear. Ellie, it's happening, they're setting the court date. 2 weeks. Ellie exhaled deeply. The final chapter was calling. She looked out at the ocean, waves hitting the rocks like applause from a faraway crowd. Then we finish it, she said quietly. Court day arrived with a morning that felt too bright for such a heavy story. The courthouse buzzed with reporters and spectators. Ellie walked in wearing a white blouse and soft gray skirt, hair tied back neatly, face calm. Grant walked beside her, carrying files. Tara whispered, "You got this." Inside, Kyle sat in a wheelchair near the defense table, arm in a sling, a small scar above his brow. His arrogance had melted into something duller, fear mixed with shame. But when his eyes met Ellie's, a ghost of the old smirk tried to rise. She didn't flinch. She simply looked at him as one might look at a photograph from another life. The prosecutor laid everything bare: recordings, bank statements, fake signatures, videos from the warehouse. Each piece of evidence felt like a stone placed gently on truth's side of the scale. Kyle's lawyer tried to argue stress, emotional breakdown, even temporary insanity, but the room had already chosen who to believe. When Ellie took the stand, silence filled the air. She told the story simply, the way a person does when the pain has already been spent. "He told me failure was all I'd ever be," she said softly. "He made me believe my worth depended on him. But when he took everything, I discovered I could build again, from nothing." She paused, eyes wet but voice steady. "He thought the fire would end me. It only purified me." For a moment, even the judge looked moved. Camera shutters clicked quietly. Across the room, Kyle's face twisted, anger, regret, disbelief fighting for space. When his turn came to speak, he tried charm first. "I lost control. I loved her too much." The audience murmured. The prosecutor cut him off cold. "You loved control, not her." The verdict didn't take long. Guilty on all counts. The judge's gavel echoed like thunder. Kyle slumped back pale. Ellie's hands shook, but not from fear. This was release. When she left the courtroom, reporters surrounded her, flashing lights like fireworks. A microphone appeared near her face. "Mrs. Ellis, what will you do now that justice is served?" Ellie smiled faintly. "I'll live. That's all the revenge I need." Weeks later, she stood in her new boutique, not fancy, just warm. Wooden shelves, soft lights, hand-stitched dresses made by women the foundation had supported. A bell hung over the door, the same soft chime she once lost in fire. Tara arranged ribbons on a table while Grant finalized paperwork for the grand reopening. Outside, a small crowd waited for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. When Ellie stepped forward to speak, the breeze lifted her hair. "This store isn't about clothes," she said, voice carrying gently through the street. "It's about new beginnings. It's proof that even ashes can bloom if you keep believing." The crowd clapped. Tears slipped down faces, women, men, strangers who'd followed her story online. Somewhere in the front row, an older woman whispered, "She's the one who didn't give up." Ellie caught the words and smiled. Later that night, after everyone left, she stayed alone in the shop. The air smelled of lavender and new fabric. On the counter lay a small box addressed to her in neat handwriting. Her heart skipped. No return name. She opened it carefully. Inside was an old pocket watch, her uncle's, the one he'd used to teach her about gears and time. A note sat beneath it, "Heard your voice. Proud of you. Itch." Ellie pressed the watch to her heart, tears spilling silently. For the first time in years, they weren't tears of loss, they were tears of peace. She whispered, "Thank you for waiting for me to find my own time." The doorbell rang softly behind her. She turned. Detective Hall stood there, smiling. "He got 15 years, Hall said. "He'll have plenty of time to think." Ellie nodded. "Good. Maybe in there he'll finally learn silence." Hall chuckled. "And you? What's next?" Ellie looked around the store, the photos of survivors on the wall, the laughter echoing faintly from earlier. "Next," she said, "I tell more stories. Not about him. About us, the women who rise." As Hall left, Ellie locked up, turned off the lights and stepped outside. The street was quiet. The rain had stopped, but the ground still glistened like the world had been washed clean. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "I forgive you, Kyle. But I won't forget who I became because of you." She walked home beneath the moonlight, her reflection following in every puddle, a woman reborn. The next morning, the news aired one final story. Ellie Ellis launches global initiative to empower betrayed women, the Second Son Project. The anchor's voice said, "Sometimes strength isn't in what we lose, but what we choose to rebuild." Viewers across countries watched the clip. Nigeria, America, Kenya, London. each person seeing a piece of their own struggle reflected in hers. Comments flooded her channel. She turned pain into power. This gave me hope. I needed this today. And in that digital storm of hearts and words, Ellie sat at her desk, smiling softly as sunlight touched her hands. The boutique sign above her window read Second Son, where every ending starts again. She whispered to herself, Uncle Howard was right. Small things tell the truth. Then she pressed upload on her new video, My Journey from Fire to Fortune. Her voice began the narration the way all good stories begin, with truth that heals. Sometimes the ones who break you are the reason you rise stronger. Sometimes the goodbye you feared is the beginning you needed. And sometimes, losing everything is just how the universe clears space for your miracle. She looked straight into the camera, her eyes steady, and smiled. Thank you for walking this road with me. If you're watching right now, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to support our growth, and drop your city in the comments below. Let's remind the world that kindness and courage still exist. The screen faded to soft light and the words, the fire didn't end her, it defined her.